She's barely old enough to be called Wolf, and you expect her to break a curse that's consumed the most powerful alpha in the Northern Kingdoms? The head witch's voice dripped with contempt as she gestured dismissively toward the trembling figure huddled in the corner of the throne room. Elspeth kept her eyes downward, her thin omega frame practically drowning in the oversized servant's tunic she wore. Around her, the grand chamber of Bloodmoon Keep buzzed with whispered mockery from the assembled council members, high-ranking wolves, and visiting dignitaries who'd gathered for yet another failed curse-breaking ceremony. "My king requires a solution, not your judgment of potential candidates," growled Commander Vane, his scarred face twisted in barely controlled fury. 17 witches have tried. 17 have failed. The Alpha King weakens with each passing moon. Elspeth risked a glance toward the massive throne at the chamber's center, and her breath caught despite herself. There he sat, Alpha King Demon Blackthorn, and even cursed, even clearly suffering, he was the most magnificent male she'd ever seen. His frame towered even while seated, impossibly broad shoulders stretching the black leather that strained across his muscular chest. Dark hair fell in those perfectly tousled waves that somehow made him look both regal and wildly untamed. But it was his eyes that captured her, piercing amber that seemed to glow with an inner fire, though she could see the pain flickering behind that golden intensity. Around his wrists, ankles, and throat, chains of pure silver burned into his flesh, etched with runes that pulsed an ugly crimson. The blood curse. She'd heard the stories whispered in the servant quarters. 3 years ago, a vengeful dark witch had bound the Alpha King with chains that fed on his very life force, growing tighter and more agonizing with each moon cycle. The curse would only break when someone spoke the true words, whatever that meant. No one knew. Dozens had tried. All had failed. The Omega stays. The Alpha King's voice cut through the chamber like a blade, deep, commanding, but edged with exhaustion. Those amber eyes fixed on Elspeth, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "I've allowed your witches, your priestesses, your blood mages. None have succeeded. Let the girl try." "My king, she's nothing," High Priestess Morven interjected, her elegant features twisted in disbelief. "An Omega servant found abandoned as a pup. She has no training, no lineage, no power worthy of—" "I said she stays." The command in Demon's tone made several wolves in the room instinctively bow their heads in submission. Even cursed and weakened, his alpha dominance rolled through the chamber in waves that made Elspeth's knees weak. She didn't understand why she'd been brought here. That morning she'd been scrubbing floors in the West Wing when royal guards had seized her, dragging her through the keep's corridors, while other servants whispered and pointed. No explanation. No chance to protest. Just rough hands and frightened confusion until they'd thrown her into this room full of people who looked at her like she was less than dirt beneath their boots. The head witch, Morven, made an elaborate show of sighing before turning her cold eyes on Elspeth. "Come here, girl. Let's get this humiliation over with." Elspeth's legs barely supported her as she crossed the polished stone floor. She could feel hundreds of eyes tracking her every stumbling step, could hear the barely suppressed snickers from clusters of high-born wolves who clearly found the entire situation entertaining. Her cheeks burned with shame. Whatever this was, whoever had decided she should be here, they'd made a terrible mistake. As she approached the throne, the true magnitude of Demon Blackthorn's size became apparent. Even seated, he was enormous, easily 7 feet of solid, powerful muscle. His arms were thick with defined strength, veins visible beneath tanned skin that seemed to radiate heat. The silver chains bit deep into his flesh, and she could see fresh blood seeping from where the cursed metal touched him. It made her heart clench with unexpected pain. "Closer," he commanded softly, and those amber eyes seemed to bore straight into her soul. She took 3 more steps until she stood directly before him, close enough now to see the sharp points of wolf ears emerging from his dark hair, the slight elongation of his canines when he spoke. close enough to catch his scent, pine and smoke, and something wildly masculine that made her inner Omega whimper with recognition she didn't understand. "What's your name?" His voice was gentler now, though no less powerful. "Elspeth, my king." She forced the words past her tight throat. "Elspeth Greythorn." Something flickered across his features. Surprise? Recognition? But it vanished before she could be certain. "Very well." Morven's sharp voice shattered the moment. "Girl, place your hands on the chains. Speak whatever pathetic attempt at curse-breaking you can manage, and when you fail, like all the others, we can move forward with real solutions." "She doesn't know any curse-breaking spells," someone called from the crowd. Laughter rippled through the chamber. "Perhaps she'll cry on them," another voice suggested. "Maybe tears are the secret." More laughter. Elspeth wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. Why was she here? What cruel joke was this? But the Alpha King's eyes never left her face, and somehow that steady amber gaze gave her a thread of courage to cling to. "Try," Demon said quietly, for her ears alone. "Please." That single word, please, from the most powerful Alpha in 5 kingdoms, spoken with such raw vulnerability, cracked something open in her chest. Without fully understanding why, Elspeth reached forward and placed her small hands on the burning silver chains at his wrist. The metal seared her palms instantly. She gasped at the pain, but didn't pull away, even as she felt her skin blister. The chains pulsed with that crimson light, and she could feel the dark magic writhing through them like living things, feeding on the Alpha King's life force, slowly draining his magnificent strength. Words rose in her throat. Not spell words or incantations she'd learned, because she'd never been taught any magic at all. Just words that came from somewhere deep and instinctive, from a place she didn't know existed inside her. "You're hurting him." The whisper fell from her lips as tears began streaming down her face, and she didn't know if she was speaking to the chains or the magic or the witch who'd cast this horror. "You're killing him, and he's... The room had gone silent. Even the mockers seemed to hold their breath. "He's good," Elspeth continued, the words flowing now like water breaking through a dam. "I've watched him from the servant passages. I've seen how he treats even the lowest Omega with respect, how he carries the weight of thousands on these shoulders and never complains, how he sits alone in this throne room late at night when everyone else sleeps, and the pain becomes too much, and he thinks no one can see him struggle. But I see. I've always seen. And you have no right to hurt him. No right to take this male who gives everything to his people and drain him like this. It's wrong. It's cruel. And I'm begging you, please, please let him go." Her voice broke on the last words, raw and desperate, and she was sobbing now, her tears falling onto the silver chains, onto his scarred wrists, mixing with his blood. The crimson light flickered. Somewhere in the throne room, someone gasped. "Impossible," Morven breathed. Elspeth couldn't see through her tears, but she felt it. The subtle shift in the magic, like something that had been clenched tight, suddenly loosening just a fraction. The chains vibrated under her palms, and the runes carved into the silver began to dim. "Keep going." Demon's voice was tight with something between hope and disbelief. "Don't stop. Whatever you're doing, Elspeth, don't stop." But she didn't know what she was doing. She only knew that this male, this powerful and devastating Alpha King, deserved better than this slow, agonizing death. She pressed her burned palms harder against the chains despite the pain, and more words tumbled out. Not crafted or calculated, just true. "You think he's just strength and dominance, but he's more," she whispered. "He's the king who remembers every soldier's name, who visits the hospital wing after battles and stays until the last wounded wolf is comfortable, who reduced his own tribute share so the northern territories could rebuild after the floods. He's worthy of protection, of healing, of someone fighting for him the way he fights for everyone else." The chains shuddered violently. Several links cracked with sounds like breaking glass. The crimson light surged and sputtered, the runes flickering between that angry red and something dimmer, weaker. "By the old gods," Commander Vane's voice carried clearly in the stunned silence. "She's actually doing it." "She can't be." Morven stalked forward, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. "She's an Omega nobody with no training, no power, no—" "She has truth," Demon interrupted, his amber eyes blazing now with something beyond pain. "The curse responds to truth, not power." That was always the answer. Not magical might or ancient incantations, just someone who could see clearly enough to speak what's real. His gaze fixed on Elspeth with an intensity that made her knees buckle. "You see me. Not the title or the legend or the dominance displays. You see me." "I've always seen you," Elspeth admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Every night for 2 years I've watched from the servant passages while you sit alone with your pain. I wanted to help, but I'm nobody. I'm nothing. You're everything." The rawness in his voice stopped her stammering. "You're the answer I've been dying for. Literally." The chains gave one final violent shudder, and then they shattered. All of them, simultaneously. Wrists, ankles, throat. Exploding into fragments of silver that dissolved into sparkling mist before hitting the ground. The curse marks on Demon's skin flared bright crimson one last time, then faded, leaving only faint silver scars where the burning metal had been. For a heartbeat, the entire throne room stood frozen in shocked silence. Then Demon Blackthorn rose to his full, devastating height, and Elspeth understood for the first time what it meant to see an Alpha King truly unleashed. He was massive, towering over her by more than 1.5 feet, his shoulders impossibly broad, his muscular frame radiating a raw power that had been suppressed by the curse. His amber eyes blazed with gold fire, and she could see the wolf more clearly now. Pointed ears, elongated canines, claws extending from his fingers. That perfect balance between man and beast that marked the most powerful of their kind. He took one step toward her, then another, and before she could process what was happening, his large hand cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted his overwhelming size. "Thank you," he breathed, and then his lips were on hers, claiming her mouth in a kiss that sent lightning through every nerve in her body. The throne room erupted in chaos. "My king, this is highly irregular." Morven's shrill voice cut through the din. "You cannot possibly be suggesting that this Omega, this servant, is somehow my mate." Demon's voice rang with absolute authority as he pulled back from the kiss, though his hand remained cradling Elspeth's face. "She is my fated mate. I've known from the moment she entered this room and her scent hit me. The curse prevented me from acting, from claiming, but now..." His lips curved into a smile that was pure, predatory satisfaction. "Now nothing stands in my way." "That's absurd," High Priestess Morven sputtered. "She has no status, no lineage worthy of..." "She broke a curse that stumped every magic user in 5 kingdoms. Commander Vane's gruff voice held clear amusement. "I'd say that's worthy enough." "The girl is Omega," another council member shouted. "The Alpha King's mate should be a female of power, of recognized breeding, not some abandoned." The growl that rumbled from Demon's chest silenced the entire chamber instantly. It was a sound of pure alpha dominance, the kind that made wolves' instincts scream to submit or flee. Elspeth felt her Omega nature respond with a full body shiver, but it wasn't fear. It was recognition, acceptance, rightness. "Choose your next words carefully," Demon said softly, and the quiet made it more menacing than any shout. "Because you're speaking about my mate, and I've just spent 3 years in excruciating torment. My patience is limited, and my wolf is very protective." As if to emphasize his point, his eyes flared pure gold, and Elspeth could see the beast right beneath the surface, ready to defend her against any threat. The council member who'd spoken went pale and immediately bowed his head in submission. My apologies, my king. I meant no disrespect. Yes, you did. Demon's tone remained deadly calm. But I'm in an exceptionally forgiving mood, given that I'm no longer being slowly murdered by cursed chains. So here's what's going to happen. Elspeth Greythorn is my fated mate, chosen by destiny and proven by her courage. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally, preferably in the training ring, where I can work out 3 years of pent-up frustration on your face. Dead silence. Then, slowly, wolves throughout the chamber began to bow. First the soldiers, then the servants who'd been watching from the edges. Then finally, reluctantly, the council members and high-born wolves who clearly weren't happy, but also weren't stupid enough to challenge an alpha king who'd just been freed from a death curse. Only Morven remained standing, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. This is a mistake. The girl has no training to be queen, no understanding of court politics, no... Then she'll learn. Demon's hand slid down to capture Elspeth's, his large fingers engulfing her smaller ones with a possessiveness that made her inner Omega purr. With me to teach her, to protect her, to ensure that anyone who disrespects her answers to me personally. Or perhaps you'd like to volunteer to test my commitment to that promise, Morven. The head witch's lips pressed into a thin line. After a moment, she too bowed, though the gesture dripped with resentment. As you wish, my king. Good. Demon turned his full attention back to Elspeth, and the shift in his expression from deadly threat to warm affection was startling. Are you all right? Your hands! He lifted her palms, his features darkening as he saw the burns from the cursed silver. These need immediate treatment, and you've been crying. Did someone hurt you before you came here? Because I swear by all the old gods, if anyone laid a hand on you... No, I'm fine, Elspeth managed, though her voice shook with the overwhelm of everything happening. I don't understand. Why did you call me here? How did you know I could help when I don't have any magic or training or... I didn't know. His thumb traced gently across her knuckles, careful to avoid the burned skin. But 2 nights ago, I woke from a dream. In it, a female whispered words that made the chains crack. I couldn't see her face, couldn't catch her scent, but I heard her voice. Then yesterday, I was passing through the West Wing and heard someone singing. A servant girl cleaning the corridors. The same voice from my dream. Elspeth's eyes widened. You heard me singing? Terribly off-key, he said with a hint of teasing that made her cheeks flame. But it was you. I asked the guards to find out who you were, to bring you here. It was a desperate gamble, but I was running out of time. The healers gave me another week at most before the curse consumed me completely. The casual way he spoke of his impending death made her heart clench. You could have died. I was dying, he corrected. You saved me. This tiny, fierce Omega, who probably weighs less than one of my arms, who had every reason to be terrified, stood before a room full of wolves who were mocking you and spoke truth with such raw courage that ancient curse magic couldn't resist. His eyes blazed with something that made her breath catch. Do you have any idea how extraordinary you are? I'm really not, Elspeth whispered. I'm just... mine. The word was a possessive growl. You're mine, Elspeth Greythorn. My mate, my miracle, my salvation. And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives ensuring you never doubt your worth again. Before she could respond, he swept her up into his arms with effortless strength, cradling her against his broad chest as if she weighed nothing. The position should have felt vulnerable, but instead she felt safer than she ever had in her life, surrounded by his heat and strength and the steady thunder of his heartbeat against her ear. Commander Vane, Demon called, without taking his eyes off Elspeth. Have the healers prepare the royal chambers. My mate needs treatment for her burns. Right away, my king. The scarred commander sounded genuinely pleased. And might I say, congratulations. She's a brave one. The bravest, Demon agreed softly. As he strode from the throne room with Elspeth in his arms, she caught glimpses of the reactions they left behind. Commander Vane grinning broadly, several soldiers looking genuinely happy, the council members wearing expressions ranging from shock to calculation to poorly hidden displeasure. Morven's face was a mask of cold fury, and Elspeth felt a flutter of anxiety. "She hates me," Elspeth whispered. "The head witch. And half your council. They think I'm not good enough." "They'll learn otherwise." Demon's arms tightened around her protectively. "And if they don't, they'll learn to keep their opinions to themselves or find employment elsewhere. You broke an impossible curse, Elspeth. You saw what dozens of trained magic users missed. That makes you exactly smart enough, powerful enough, and worthy enough to stand at my side." They moved through corridors Elspeth had only ever cleaned, past tapestries and artwork she'd only glimpsed while scrubbing floors or emptying chamber pots. Wolves bowed as they passed, and she saw shock and curiosity on every face. By tomorrow, the entire kingdom would know that the Alpha King's fated mate was an Omega servant. "They're going to talk," she said nervously. "The gossip will be, 'Let them talk.'" His voice held that edge of command that made her Omega instincts purr with satisfaction. "Let them see their king claim his mate regardless of status or convention. Let them understand that true strength isn't about bloodlines or social standing. It's about courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand up even when you're terrified. Qualities you have in abundance." He shouldered through a set of carved double doors into a chamber so magnificent it stole her breath. This had to be the royal quarters, a vast space with a fireplace large enough to walk into, furniture of dark wood and rich fabrics, walls hung with weapons and pelts and artwork. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the mountain ranges that surrounded Bloodmoon Keep, and the setting sun painted everything in shades of amber and gold. Demon set her carefully on a sofa near the fire, then knelt before her, this massive, powerful Alpha King kneeling at the feet of an Omega servant, and took her burned hands in his with infinite gentleness. "I need to examine these properly," he said. "May I?" The fact that he asked permission, that he gave her choice even in something so simple, made her throat tight with emotion. She nodded, not trusting her voice. His touch was feather-light as he turned her palms upward, studying the burns from the cursed silver. His jaw tightened, and she saw the flash of gold in his eyes that meant his wolf was close to the surface. "These are serious." The silver was designed to cause maximum pain. That's part of the curse's cruelty. That you held on despite this. "It was hurting you worse," Elspeth said simply. "I could feel the curse draining you through the chains. My burned hands seemed like a small price to stop that." Those amber eyes snapped up to meet hers, blazing with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "You sacrificed your own well-being for mine. You who I'd just met, who owed me nothing. You're my king. You protect all of us. Someone needed to protect you." "No." His voice was rough with emotion. "Not your king. Your mate. There's a difference, Elspeth. As king, yes, I protect my people. But as your mate, you protect me. You stand as my equal, my partner, my other half. Not because I'm some distant ruler you owe fealty to, but because we're bound by something deeper than duty or hierarchy." A knock at the door interrupted before she could respond. Demon called permission to enter, and 3 healers bustled in carrying cases of supplies. They bowed quickly to the Alpha King, then turned their attention to Elspeth. "My king will need to clean and dress the burns," the lead healer, an older female with kind eyes, said gently. "The cursed silver leaves toxins that need to be drawn out. It will be painful, but necessary. Do what you need to do," Demon said. "I'm staying." Elspeth appreciated that more than she could express. As the healers began their work, cleaning her burned palms with solutions that stung viciously, she fixed her gaze on Demon's face and drew strength from his steady presence. He held her gaze the entire time, and occasionally, when she couldn't suppress a wince, his hand would reach out to squeeze her shoulder in silent support. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured. "So brave, my fierce little mate." The healers worked efficiently, applying salves that numbed the worst of the pain, then wrapping her hands in clean bandages. The lead healer gave her careful instructions about keeping the wounds clean and dry, then bowed and led the others from the room, leaving Elspeth and Demon alone. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Elspeth stared at her bandaged hands, reality crashing down on her in waves. This morning, she'd been a nobody servant. Now she was supposedly the fated mate of the most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms, sitting in the royal chambers while her entire life transformed in ways she couldn't begin to process. "You're overwhelmed," Demon observed quietly. "I can sense your anxiety." "I don't know how to be what you need," she admitted, her voice small. "I can clean floors and mend clothes and work in the kitchens. I can read and write because one of the older servants taught me, but I don't know politics or diplomacy or how to be a queen. I don't know which fork to use at formal dinners or how to address visiting dignitaries or—" "Elspeth!" He moved from where he'd been standing to sit beside her on the sofa, and the furniture seemed to shrink with his size. "Look at me." She forced her eyes up to meet his. "You don't need to know any of that right now," he said firmly. "Yes, there are things you'll learn, because you're intelligent and capable, and I have no doubt you'll master whatever you set your mind to. But those are just skills, things anyone can be taught. What matters, what makes you perfect as my mate, is who you are. Your courage, your compassion, the fact that you watched a king in pain from the shadows and cared enough to risk trying to help him." "I wasn't risking anything," she protested. "I thought I was just going to embarrass myself in front of the court and then go back to scrubbing floors." "You risked vulnerability. You let yourself care openly, let yourself cry for someone else's suffering, in a room full of wolves who'd shown you nothing but contempt. Do you know how rare that is? How rare. How many people in positions of power would rather die than show that kind of honest emotion?" He reached out and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, the gesture tender despite his massive, clawed hand. "You spoke truth when everyone else was focused on performance and displays of power. That's why the curse broke, Elspeth. Not because you're weak or small or just an Omega. Because you're genuine in a way that most wolves never achieve." Tears pricked her eyes again, but this time from something other than fear or pain. "I want to be worthy of you." "You already are." The absolute certainty in his voice left no room for argument. "And I'm going to make sure everyone in this kingdom understands that. Starting tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" She blinked at him. "Tomorrow, I'm calling a gathering of the high families and formally announcing our mate bond. I'm giving you the recognition you deserve, as my chosen, my equal, my future queen." His expression turned fierce. "Anyone who has a problem with that will learn to keep it to themselves, or face me in challenge. I've been patient with the council's politics for years, playing their games to maintain peace. But you're not a political piece, Elspeth. You're my mate, and I will tear apart anyone who tries to hurt or diminish you." The protectiveness in his voice, the raw possessiveness, should have been frightening. Instead, it made her feel cherished in a way she never had before. This male, this devastating Alpha King, was claiming her not despite her Omega status, but because of who she fundamentally was. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Not of you, of letting you down, of not being enough when you need me to be." "Then we're even." His lips curved in a slight smile. "Because I'm terrified of failing you, of this broken kingdom's politics crushing your beautiful spirit, of not protecting you well enough from the wolves who will resent our bond." She stared at him in surprise. "You're afraid?" "Constantly." He reached for her bandaged hand, holding it with exquisite gentleness. "Being king means living with fear that you'll make the wrong choice, that you'll fail the wolves depending on you. But the fear doesn't have to control you. It just reminds you what matters. And you, Elspeth Greythorn, matter more to me than anything in this world." The raw honesty in his words cracked open something in her chest, and before she could second-guess herself, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was clumsy and uncertain. She had no real experience with this. But Demon made a low, pleased sound and took over, angling her head with his large hand and kissing her with a controlled passion that made her toes curl. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were blazing pure gold and she could see his wolf right at the surface, pleased and possessive. "You're going to be the death of me," he murmured against her lips. "But what a way to go." She laughed, the sound surprising them both, and then she was laughing harder, releasing the tension and fear and overwhelm of the entire impossible day. Demon grinned at her, and the expression transformed his normally stern features into something boyish and beautiful. "There she is," he said softly. "My fierce, brave mate. I was starting to worry I'd never hear you laugh." "I don't think I've laughed like this in years," she admitted. "Being a servant isn't exactly filled with joy." His expression darkened. "Were you mistreated?" "I try to ensure all wolves in my employ are treated fairly, but if someone— No, nothing like that," she assured him quickly. "Just lonely, I suppose. Being Omega means other servants don't really befriend you. You're too low status to be worth their time. So I worked and slept and worked some more, and that was life." "Not anymore." The vow in his voice was absolute. "You're never going to be alone or dismissed again, Elspeth. You're going to have a mate who worships you, a pack that respects you, and anyone who fails to treat you with the honor you deserve will answer to me." A soft knock at the door interrupted them again. At Demon's command, a servant entered carrying a tray laden with food: roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruits, and a pitcher of wine. The female's eyes went wide when she saw Elspeth sitting so close to the Alpha King, but she recovered quickly, set the tray on a low table, and bowed before hurrying out. "You need to eat," Demon said, noting Elspeth's hollow cheeks. "When did you last have a proper meal?" She flushed. "Servants eat after the pack is fed, and by then there's usually just not enough," he finished grimly. "That changes now. From this moment on, you're not a servant, Elspeth. You're my mate, and you'll be cared for as such." He prepared a plate for her with his own hands, and she was struck by the surreal nature of watching the Alpha King serve her food. But he seemed utterly unself-conscious about it, selecting choice pieces of meat and a generous portion of everything else before handing it to her. "I don't know if I can eat all this," she said, looking at the heaping plate. "Eat what you can. We'll work on building your strength back up." His eyes raked over her thin frame with clear disapproval. "You're too light. Have you been giving away your food portions?" She squirmed under his perceptive gaze. "Sometimes the younger Omegas were hungrier, and I could skip a meal here and there. No more." The command was gentle but absolute. "I admire your generous heart, but you can't care for others if you're not caring for yourself. And now you have a mate who's going to ensure you're properly fed and protected." They ate together as the sun finished setting and the room darkened, lit now by firelight that cast dancing shadows across the stone walls. Demon asked her questions about her life, where she'd come from, how she'd ended up at Blood Moon Keep, what she enjoyed doing. The answers were depressing in their simplicity. "I don't remember my parents," she told him. "I was found on the keep's doorstep as a pup, maybe 4 or 5 years old. No note, no explanation. The servants took me in, and I worked for my keep as soon as I was old enough. That's been my life, 17 years of cleaning and serving, and trying to be useful enough not to be turned out." The muscle in his jaw ticked. "You were a child. You should have been in the pack school, learning and playing with other pups, not working as a servant." "Omegas don't usually go to school," she said simply. "We're not expected to need education for the work we do. That's going to change." Demon's tone promised upheaval. "Starting with a thorough review of how Omegas are treated in this kingdom. If children are being denied education and proper care because of their designation, then I've failed as a king, and that ends now." The fierce protectiveness in his voice wasn't just for her, she realized. It was for every Omega who'd been dismissed and undervalued the way she had been. This male, this Alpha King, genuinely cared about the wolves others overlooked. "You really are good," she whispered. "I told the curse the truth. You're worthy of protection, of someone fighting for you." His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking across her cheekbone. "And you fought for me when no one else could. You saved my life, Elspeth. There's no way I can ever adequately repay that debt." It's not a debt, she protested. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. His voice was raw with emotion. My life, my freedom, my future. All of it exists because you had the courage to try when everyone else thought you'd fail. He leaned in and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, and she felt the bond between them like a living thing, a golden thread connecting her soul to his, growing stronger with each moment they spent together. The mate bond. She'd heard of it in stories, but never imagined she'd experience it herself. Omegas like her didn't get fairy tale endings. Except apparently, she was living one. When they finally broke apart, Demon rested his forehead against hers. I know this is moving fast. I know you probably need time to adjust to everything that's changed. But my wolf is desperate to complete the mate bond, to claim you fully, and I'm barely holding him back. So I need you to tell me what you need, what pace you're comfortable with, because otherwise I'm going to— I want this, Elspeth interrupted, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. I want you. I've watched you for 2 years, Demon. I've seen your strength and honor, and the way you carry the weight of the kingdom on those impossibly broad shoulders. I've seen your loneliness and pain, and all I wanted was to comfort you somehow. Now I have that chance, and I'm not going to run from it because I'm scared or uncertain. His eyes blazed pure gold. You're sure? I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm sure. You're my mate. I felt it the moment I touched you, the moment the bond snapped into place, and I want to be yours completely. The growl that rumbled from his chest was pure satisfaction. Then you will be. But first— He stood in one fluid motion and swept her back into his arms, carrying her through a doorway into another chamber. His bedroom, she realized, seeing the massive bed that dominated the space. It would have to be enormous to accommodate his size, but it still looked impossibly huge to her eyes. He set her down gently on the edge of the mattress, then knelt before her again, this devastating Alpha King kneeling at her feet like she was something precious. I'm going to claim you as my mate, he said, his voice deep and rough with barely controlled need. I'm going to mark you, complete our bond, and make it absolutely clear to every wolf in this kingdom that you're mine. But I need you to understand something first. His large hands framed her face, and those amber eyes bored into hers with fierce intensity. This isn't just about physical claiming, though that will happen, and will be incredible, he continued. This is about binding our souls together permanently. Once the mate bond is complete, I'll feel your emotions, sense your distress, know when you're in danger, and you'll feel me the same way. We'll be connected on a level deeper than most wolves ever experience. There's no undoing it, no going back. So if you have any doubts, any hesitation, tell me now. Elspeth reached out with her bandaged hands and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble of his strong jaw beneath her fingers. No doubts. I want this. I want you. I want to be connected to you forever, to never be alone again, to have this mate who sees me and values me and makes me feel like I matter. You do matter. The words came out fierce and possessive. More than you know. More than I can properly express. So let me show you instead. He stood and began removing his leather jerkin, revealing the powerful musculature beneath. A chest and abdomen that looked carved from stone, all defined plains and valleys of pure strength. His arms were massive, biceps and forearms corded with muscle, and covered in scars that spoke of countless battles. He was magnificent, devastating, almost overwhelming in his masculinity. And he was hers. Elspeth's breath came faster as he approached the bed, and she saw the golden glow of his eyes, the sharp points of his canines, the slight elongation of his claws. His wolf was at the surface, and the primal dominance rolling off him made her Omega instincts sing with recognition and submission. Not the scared, forced submission she'd learned as a servant, but the deep, biological rightness of Omega recognizing her alpha mate. Don't be afraid, he murmured, though she could hear the strain in his voice as he fought for control. I'll be gentle. I'll take care of you. I'm not afraid, she whispered truthfully. Not of you, Never of you. His response was a deep, approving growl that vibrated through her entire body. Then his hands were on her, carefully removing her simple servant's clothing with a gentleness that contradicted his size and obvious need. When she was bare before him, she fought the urge to cover herself, to hide the evidence of her thin frame and harsh life. But Demon made a sound of pure appreciation, his heated gaze raking over her like a physical touch. "Perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect. My mate." He joined her on the bed, his weight making the mattress dip, and then his hands and mouth were everywhere. Exploring, claiming, worshipping. He kissed every scar, every hollow, every part of her that she'd thought unworthy of attention, and his touch was reverent despite the obvious struggle he was having maintaining control. "Mine," he growled against her skin. "My mate, my female, mine to protect and pleasure and cherish." The words sent heat coursing through her, and when his hand slid between her thighs, testing her readiness, she gasped at the sensation. He was careful, preparing her with skilled touches that made her writhe and moan, ensuring she was ready before finally positioning himself above her. "This will hurt at first," he warned, his voice strained. "But I promise it gets better. Just hold on to me, little mate." She wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling the powerful muscles of his shoulders bunch beneath her touch, and then he was pressing into her. Slowly, carefully, stretching her in ways that burned and ached. She whimpered despite trying to be brave, and immediately he stopped. "Breathe," he instructed. "Just breathe through it. I've got you." He waited, letting her adjust, pressing gentle kisses to her face and murmuring reassurances until her body began to relax, accommodating his size. Then he moved deeper, and she felt the moment something gave way. A sharp pain, followed by a strange feeling of fullness. "There," Demon breathed, and the satisfaction in his voice was primal. "Taking me so well, little mate. So perfect." He began to move, slow, careful thrusts that gradually built a heat inside her she'd never experienced. The initial pain faded, replaced by sensation that made her arch against him, seeking more. His control was impressive, the way he held back his obvious need to pound into her, maintaining that careful pace until she was writhing beneath him, making desperate sounds she didn't recognize as her own voice. "That's it," he encouraged roughly. "Feel what I'm doing to you. Feel how perfectly we fit together." One of his large hands slid between their bodies, finding that sensitive bundle of nerves and circling with devastating precision. The combined sensation of his size inside her and his skilled touch on her most sensitive flesh sent her spiraling into a climax that made her cry out his name. Demon growled his approval, then finally let himself move faster, harder, chasing his own release. At the moment of his completion, she felt his canines pierce the juncture of her neck and shoulder, the mating mark, permanently branding her as his. The pain and pleasure mixed together, and she felt the mate bond snap fully into place like a lock clicking home. He was in her mind, her heart, her very soul. She could feel his emotions, the fierce possessiveness, the overwhelming satisfaction, the deep well of protectiveness toward her. And she knew he felt her too, her awe, her joy, her complete acceptance of him as her mate. When he finally withdrew and collapsed beside her, carefully arranging her against his chest, they were both breathing hard. His large hand splayed possessively across her back, and she could feel his heartbeat thundering beneath her ear. "Mine," he murmured, sounding deeply content. "My mate, my Elspeth." "Yours," she agreed, testing the mate mark he'd left on her neck with careful fingers. It would scar, she knew, a permanent physical sign of their bond that every wolf would recognize. They lay together in comfortable silence as their breathing gradually returned to normal. Through the new mate bond, Elspeth could feel Demon's contentment mixing with lingering protectiveness, and what she was fairly certain was smug male satisfaction. "You're pleased with yourself," she observed with amusement. "Extremely." She could hear the grin in his voice. "I have my beautiful mate in my bed, marked and claimed, and the entire kingdom will know by tomorrow that you're mine. Yes, I'm very pleased." She laughed softly, then winced as her burned hands reminded her of their presence. Demon immediately noticed, his demeanor shifting to concern. "Did I hurt you? Were you uncomfortable?" "No, just my hands from earlier." She showed him the bandages. "I'm fine otherwise. More than fine, actually." He carefully took her hands in his, placing gentle kisses on the bandaged palms. "These will heal. I'll have the healers check them daily, ensure there's no infection from the cursed silver. And if there are scars, then I'll have scars," Elspeth finished. "Battle wounds from breaking an impossible curse. I can live with that." "My fierce little mate," he murmured with clear affection. "Though I suppose you won't stay little for long. Proper feeding and care should fill out that too-thin frame within a few months." She ducked her head, embarrassed, but he tilted her chin back up with one finger. "Don't hide from me," he said gently. "I love everything about you, including your delicate build. I just want you healthy and strong, not struggling because you've been denied adequate food." The casualness with which he said "love" made her breath catch. "You love me? Already?" "The mate bond doesn't always mean instant love," he acknowledged. "Sometimes it takes time to grow. But yes, Elspeth, I love you already. I loved you from the moment you placed your hands on cursed chains, despite the pain, and spoke truth that saved my life. I loved your courage and compassion, and the fact that you saw past all the barriers of rank and status to simply care about someone suffering. How could I not love that?" Tears pricked her eyes. Happy tears this time. "I think I've loved you for 2 years, watching you from the shadows. I just didn't have a word for what I felt." His arms tightened around her, pulling her impossibly closer against his broad chest. "Then we're both fortunate the curse brought us together, despite the pain it caused. Something good came from those 3 years of torment." They drifted in comfortable silence for a while, and Elspeth felt herself growing drowsy in the warmth and safety of his embrace. Through the mate bond, she could feel his contentment, his protectiveness, and beneath it all, a fierce determination that made her curious. "What are you planning?" she asked sleepily. "I can feel you thinking something intense." "Tomorrow's announcement," he admitted. "I'm considering how to make it absolutely clear that you're not just my mate, but my equal in authority. The council will push back, try to maintain their influence, but I'm done playing political games where you're concerned." "You don't have to antagonize them on my account," she protested. "I don't need grand gestures or—" "Yes, you do." His voice was firm. "Not because you're insecure and need validation, but because the wolves of this kingdom need to understand that the hierarchy they've clung to, where omegas are dismissed and highborn wolves are automatically valued, is fundamentally broken. You proved that today by succeeding where dozens of powerful wolves failed. If my people can learn from that, if they can start valuing character over status, then this kingdom becomes stronger." She considered that, seeing the wisdom in his words. "You're using our mate bond to make a political statement about Omega rights. I'm using our mate bond to correct an injustice I should have addressed years ago," he corrected. "The fact that it took falling in love with an Omega to fully see the problem is something I'm not proud of. But now that I see it, I can't ignore it. Won't ignore it." The determination in his voice, the sense that he genuinely wanted to change things, not just for her but for every overlooked Omega in the kingdom, made her fall even deeper in love with this male. "You're a good king," she whispered. "The best kind. One who admits mistakes and works to fix them." "I try." His hand stroked gently through her hair. "Though I'll be a better king with you beside me, keeping me honest, reminding me to see the wolves others dismiss." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together in the massive royal bed, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. For the first time in her life, Elspeth felt completely safe, completely valued, completely home. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, and Demon's large form curled protectively around her. Even in sleep, his arms held her close, and she could feel his contentment through their bond. She took a moment just to study him. This devastating Alpha King who'd chosen her, who'd claimed her, who'd promised to protect and cherish her for the rest of their lives. His dark hair was thoroughly mussed, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger, less burdened. In sleep, the harsh lines of authority softened, revealing the male beneath the crown. But even relaxed, he was magnificent. All that powerful muscle, those broad shoulders, that strong jaw darkened with stubble. As if sensing her scrutiny, his amber eyes opened, immediately focusing on her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "Good morning, my beautiful mate," he rumbled, his voice deeper and rougher from sleep. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I ever have," she admitted. "Your bed is more comfortable than anything I've ever experienced." "Our bed," he corrected. "This is your room now, too. Your home. Everything I have is yours, Elspeth." Before she could respond, a sharp knock at the door interrupted. Demon growled his displeasure at the interruption, then called out, "What is it?" Commander Vane's voice came through the door. "My king, the council has assembled as you requested. They're waiting in the throne room for the formal announcement. Tell them we'll be there within the hour." Demon's tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. "As you command, my king." Footsteps retreated, and Demon turned his attention back to Elspeth. "Time to face the court. Are you ready?" "No," she answered honestly, "but I'll do it anyway, because you'll be with me." Pride shone in his eyes. "That's my brave mate. Come, let's get you dressed in something befitting a queen." He called for servants who arrived carrying armfuls of the most beautiful clothing Elspeth had ever seen. Silk dresses in deep jewel tones, soft leather boots, delicate undergarments that looked impossibly expensive. The females dressed her carefully, mindful of her bandaged hands, choosing a deep emerald gown that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes and made her dark hair shine. When they finished, Elspeth barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like someone important, someone who belonged at an Alpha King's side. Demon came up behind her, magnificent in his formal leathers, black and silver that emphasized his powerful build and regal bearing. His hands settled on her shoulders, and their eyes met in the mirror. "Perfect," he murmured. "Absolutely perfect. The court is going to lose their collective minds when they see you." "Is that good or bad?" she asked nervously. "Both, probably." He turned her to face him. "Some will be genuinely happy for us. Others will be calculating how to use our bond for political gain, and still others will resent you for disrupting their carefully maintained hierarchy. But none of that matters, because I'm going to make it absolutely clear that you're under my protection, and anyone who troubles you will answer to me personally." The fierce protectiveness in his voice steadied her nerves. Whatever happened in that throne room, she wouldn't face it alone. They walked through the keep's corridors together, and Elspeth noticed that this time, Demon deliberately matched his pace to hers, instead of making her rush to keep up. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes about how he saw their relationship, as partners, not as king and servant. The throne room doors loomed ahead, and she could hear the murmur of voices from within. Dozens of wolves assembled for the announcement. Her steps faltered, but Demon's hand found hers, his large fingers engulfing her smaller ones in a grip that was both gentle and unbreakable. "Together," he said softly. "Whatever happens, we face it together." She nodded, drew a deep breath, and stepped forward. The doors swung open to reveal the throne room packed with wolves, the entire court by the look of it, plus visiting dignitaries and high-ranking pack members. Conversations died as Demon and Elspeth entered, every eye fixing on them with expressions ranging from shock to calculation to barely concealed hostility. Demon led her straight to the throne, but instead of sitting, he turned to face the assembly, keeping Elspeth at his side, with a possessive hand at her lower back. "Thank you all for gathering on short notice," he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber with the natural command of an alpha. "I've called you here to make a formal announcement regarding my mate bond." The room held its collective breath. Yesterday, as many of you witnessed, Elspeth Greythorn broke the blood curse that's plagued me for 3 years. She succeeded where 17 trained witches, 3 blood mages, and countless healers failed. She did this through courage, compassion, and an ability to see truth that I value above any magical power or political connection. His amber eyes swept the room, daring anyone to challenge him. In doing so, she proved herself to be my fated mate, chosen by destiny and confirmed by the bond that now connects us. I have claimed her fully, and I now formally announce to this court and kingdom that Elspeth Greythorn is my mate, my equal in authority, and your future queen. The throne room erupted in chaos, gasps, shouts, excited whispers, and angry protests all mixing together. Through the noise, Elspeth caught fragments of reactions. An Omega Queen? Impossible! Did you see her, though? She actually broke the curse. This is unprecedented. The council will never. She's wearing his mating mark. It's done. Demon let them talk for a moment, then released a pulse of alpha dominance that silenced the room instantly. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of command that made several wolves instinctively bare their necks in submission. I am not asking for the council's approval or the court's permission, he said coldly. I am informing you of a bond that already exists, sanctioned by the moon goddess herself through the fated mate connection. Anyone who has a problem with my choice is welcome to take it up with me personally, in challenge if they're brave enough, or by finding employment in some other kingdom if they're not. Heavy silence. Then, from the back of the room, a single voice. I think it's wonderful, my king. Elspeth's heart leaped as she recognized one of the older servants who'd been kind to her over the years, Marta, who worked in the kitchens. The older female stepped forward, bowing respectfully. Begging your pardon for speaking out of turn, Marta continued, her weathered face creasing in a genuine smile. But I've known young Elspeth since she was a pup. She's got a good heart, works harder than any 3 wolves combined, and always helped the younger Omegas. If she's clever enough to break an impossible curse and brave enough to try when no one else believed in her, then she's more than worthy to stand beside our king. Several other servants murmured agreement, and Elspeth felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected support. Thank you, Marta, Demon said warmly. Your opinion matters more than you know. You've seen my mate's character in circumstances where many of these nobles never bothered to look. That subtle dig at the court made several high-born wolves shift uncomfortably. Commander Vane stepped forward next, dropping to one knee. My king, if I may speak. Always, old friend. The scarred commander's eyes fixed on Elspeth, and she was surprised to see approval in his weathered features. I've served under you for 15 years, my king. I've watched you lead with honor and strength, putting the pack's needs before your own comfort or safety. If you say this female is your fated mate, then I trust your judgment completely. And anyone who watched her yesterday, saw her endure pain to speak truth that saved our king's life, would have to be blind not to see her courage. He turned his attention to the assembled court. She may be Omega by designation, but she's got the heart of an Alpha. That's what matters. Several soldiers who served under Vane echoed his sentiment, and Elspeth felt the tide in the room begin to shift. Not everyone was convinced. She could see the calculation and resentment on several noble faces, but enough wolves were showing support that open opposition became less appealing. Finally, one of the council members, an older male named Corwin, who Elspeth vaguely remembered as being more reasonable than most, stepped forward and bowed. My king, while this is certainly unprecedented, the mate bond is sacred. If the moon goddess chose this female for you, then it's not the council's place to question her wisdom. He straightened and offered Elspeth a small, genuine smile. Welcome to the court, my lady. I hope you'll allow some of us to help you learn the ways of politics and diplomacy. Your courage is evident. We'll simply help you refine it into effective leadership. It was an olive branch, and Demon recognized it as such. Thank you, Counselor Corwin. Your support and guidance will be appreciated. Not everyone was so gracious. From across the room, Priestess Morven's cold voice cut through the tentative peace. And what of bloodlines, my king? The royal line has maintained its strength through careful breeding for generations. An Omega mate means Omega pups, weakening the Alpha bloodline. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Demon's eyes flashed pure gold, and the growl that rumbled from his chest made several wolves flinch. "Choose your next words very carefully, Morven," he said with deadly calm, "because you're coming dangerously close to insulting my mate, and that's something I will not tolerate from anyone, regardless of their position." The priestess's face remained cold, but she had enough self-preservation to bow slightly. "I meant no insult, my king. Simply a practical concern about—" "My future pups will have my bloodline and my mate's courage," Demon interrupted, his voice hard. "If you think designation matters more than character, then you understand nothing about what makes a true leader. I've met plenty of highborn alphas who couldn't lead a hunting party without getting wolves killed, and I'm looking at an Omega who saved a king through sheer force of will. So no, Morven, I'm not concerned about bloodlines. I'm concerned about raising pups who have their mother's compassion and their father's strength, regardless of what designation they present as." The finality in his tone made it clear the subject was closed. Morven's lips pressed into a thin line, but she bowed and retreated, clearly recognizing she'd lost this battle. Demon turned to address the full assembly again. "The mating ceremony will take place in 3 days' time, giving us time to prepare a proper celebration. All pack members are invited, from the highest-born noble to the lowest servant. Because that's what this bond represents. Recognition that worth isn't determined by birth status, but by character and courage." He pulled Elspeth closer against his side, his arm around her waist, both protective and possessive. "My mate broke an impossible curse. She saved not just my life, but this kingdom's future. Anyone who can't respect that, who can't see past outdated notions of Omega inferiority, is welcome to leave my court. I won't miss you." The challenge in his voice was clear, and Elspeth felt a surge of love for this male who was willing to lose political allies to defend her honor. "Now," Demon continued, his tone shifting to something lighter, "I believe my mate deserves a proper introduction to the keep and its operations. She'll be learning court protocols and leadership skills, so I expect everyone to treat her with the respect due to your queen. Dismissed." The assembly began to file out, though many wolves lingered, clearly hoping to catch a moment with either the Alpha King or his new mate. Demon fielded several well wishes and congratulations, his arm never leaving Elspeth's waist, keeping her anchored to his side. Commander Vane approached once the crowd thinned. "My king, if I might have a word?" "Of course." The scarred warrior glanced at Elspeth with approval. "My lady, you'll need a personal guard. The king has enemies. Any powerful alpha does. And now you're a potential target. With your permission, I'd like to assign some of my best soldiers to your protection detail." Before Elspeth could respond, Demon nodded firmly. "Agreed. Select wolves you trust completely, Vane. And make sure they understand that protecting my mate is equivalent to protecting me. Any threat to her is answered with lethal force." "Understood, my king." Vane bowed and departed, already barking orders to nearby soldiers. Elspeth watched him go, then turned to Demon with wide eyes. "Do you really think I'm in danger? That someone might try to hurt me? I think you're the most important thing in my world, and I'm taking no chances with your safety." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking across her cheekbone. "You're no longer invisible, Elspeth. You're at the center of kingdom politics now, and that makes you valuable as a target to anyone who wants to manipulate or hurt me. So yes, you're getting guards, and they're going to be with you whenever I can't be." The protectiveness in his voice, the clear fear underlying his words, made her understand this wasn't about control. It was about a male desperately protecting the mate he'd just found, and couldn't bear to lose. "Okay," she agreed softly. "I'll accept the guards. I don't want to make you worry." Relief flashed across his features. "Thank you. Now let me show you your new home properly. And then we need to meet with the seamstresses about your wardrobe, the protocol master about court procedures, and about a dozen other things that I'm realizing a new queen needs to learn." They spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind of activity, touring the keep's private areas that Elspeth had only ever cleaned from the outside, meeting with various staff members who would now be serving her directly, and beginning the overwhelming process of learning what it meant to be queen. Through it all, Demon stayed close, his presence a constant source of comfort and strength. Through their mate bond, she could feel his pride in her, his satisfaction when she asked intelligent questions or showed natural aptitude for leadership. By evening, she was exhausted, but also exhilarated. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was becoming something more than just an invisible servant existing in the shadows. As they prepared for bed that night, Demon pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. "You were magnificent today," he murmured against her lips. "The way you handled meeting all those wolves, learning so much so quickly, staying gracious even when some were clearly resentful. I'm so proud of you, little mate." "I had you with me," she said simply. "That made it possible." "We make each other stronger," he corrected. "That's what mates do. And in 3 days, when we stand before the pack for the mating ceremony, every wolf in this kingdom will see exactly how strong we are together." The mating ceremony. Elspeth felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. It would be public, formal, binding them together in a way that satisfied both tradition and politics. "Will it be very different from what we've already done?" she asked shyly. "The important parts are already complete. I've claimed you, marked you, completed the soul bond." His hand traced the mating mark on her neck possessively. "The ceremony is more for the pack, giving them a chance to witness and celebrate the bond. There will be rituals, vows, probably a feast that lasts until dawn. But the crucial part, you and me, bound together forever, that's already done." She snuggled closer against his chest, breathing in his pine and smoke scent. "I still can't quite believe this is real, that I'm really here, with you, instead of scrubbing floors in the servant quarters." "Believe it." His arms tightened around her. "Because I'm never letting you go, Elspeth. You're mine, my mate, my salvation, my future. And I'm going to spend every day proving that you made the right choice in accepting me." "You didn't really give me much choice," she teased gently. "You sort of just claimed me and announced it to the kingdom." His rumbling laugh vibrated through her. "True. But would you have said no if I'd asked?" She considered that, then shook her head. "No. I've been yours for 2 years, watching from the shadows. I just didn't know you'd someday be mine too." "Always," he vowed. "From the moment you placed your hands on those cursed chains and spoke truth that saved my life, I was yours. Body, heart, and soul." They fell asleep wrapped together, the mate bond humming contentedly between them, and Elspeth dreamed of a future she'd never dared imagine, standing beside an alpha king not as a servant, but as his equal, his partner, his forever mate. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Seamstresses fitted Elspeth for her ceremonial dress, a stunning creation of white silk and silver embroidery that made her look like something out of a fairy tale. Protocol masters drilled her on proper forms of address and ceremonial responses. And through it all, Demon was there, supporting her, encouraging her, making it clear to everyone that she had his complete faith and support. The night before the ceremony, as they lay together in their shared bed, Elspeth voiced the fear she'd been holding on to. "What if I mess up tomorrow? What if I say the wrong thing, or trip over my dress, or embarrass you in front of the entire kingdom?" Demon turned to face her, his amber eyes soft in the firelight. "Then you'll be charmingly imperfect, and I'll love you even more for it. You're not going to embarrass me, Elspeth. You're going to stand beside me with courage and grace, and every wolf present will see exactly why you're my chosen mate." "You have a lot more faith in me than I have in myself," she admitted. "That's all right. I have enough faith for both of us." His hand cupped her face tenderly. "You saved a dying king, little mate. Public speaking in a nice dress is considerably easier." She laughed despite her nerves. "When you put it that way." "Exactly." He kissed her softly. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we show the kingdom what a true mate bond looks like." The mating ceremony took place in the great courtyard of Blood Moon Keep, under the light of the full moon. Thousands of pack members gathered to witness, not just nobles and high-born wolves, but common pack members, servants, soldiers, Omegas who'd never been invited to a royal ceremony before. Demon had insisted on opening the event to everyone, making it clear that his reign valued all wolves, regardless of status. Elspeth stood in the preparation chamber, staring at her reflection and barely recognizing herself. The white silk dress fit perfectly, the silver embroidery catching the moonlight. Her dark hair had been styled with small white flowers woven through it. The mating mark on her neck was clearly visible, as was proper, a public declaration that she belonged to the Alpha King. Marta, who'd been allowed to serve as Elspeth's attendant for the ceremony, fussed with the dress's train and smiled at her. "You look like a true queen," the older female said warmly. "That boy who found you on the doorstep all those years ago would never have imagined this, eh?" "I still don't quite believe it myself," Elspeth admitted. "Part of me keeps expecting to wake up back in the servant quarters." "It's real, dear girl, and you earned it. Not through scheming or manipulation, but through genuine courage and compassion. The Alpha King chose well." A knock at the door announced it was time. Elspeth took a deep breath, sent a silent prayer to the moon goddess for strength, and walked out to face her future. The courtyard had been transformed into something magical, thousands of candles creating a pathway of light toward the central platform where Demon waited. And there he stood, magnificent in formal black and silver, his dark hair perfectly styled, his amber eyes blazing as they fixed on her with unmistakable love and possessive pride. As she walked down the candlelit path, she heard the whispers from assembled pack members. "She's beautiful." "That's the girl who broke the curse?" "The mating mark is fresh. He really did claim her immediately." "Look at how he's watching her. That's a male completely besotted." Elspeth kept her eyes forward, focused on Demon, drawing strength from his steady gaze. When she reached the platform, he extended his hand, and she placed hers in it, feeling his large fingers close around hers with gentle possessiveness. "You're stunning," he murmured for her ears alone. "Every male here is jealous, and every female is wondering how they can find a mate who looks at them the way I look at you." She felt her cheeks heat, but his words steadied her nerves. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Ancient wolf traditions, mixed with personal vows that Demon had insisted they write themselves. When it came time for her part, Elspeth spoke from the heart. "I vow to stand beside you in strength and in weakness, in victory and in challenge. To see you clearly, not just the king, but the male beneath the crown. To fight for you the way you fight for everyone else. To be your partner, your comfort, your home. From this day until my last breath, I am yours." Demon's eyes blazed with emotion as he spoke his own vows. "I vow to protect you with everything I am and everything I have. To value your courage and compassion above any political advantage or social standing. To ensure you never doubt your worth or your place at my side. To be worthy of the gift you've given me. Your trust, your heart, your forever. From this day until the world ends, you are mine, and I am yours." The elder performing the ceremony smiled and pronounced them formally mated before the pack. The assembled wolves erupted in cheers and howls, the sound echoing off the keep's stone walls and rising toward the full moon above. Demon pulled Elspeth into his arms and kissed her deeply, publicly claiming her in a way that left no doubt in anyone's mind that she was his and he was hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he turned to address the crowd. "Wolves of Blood Moon, I present to you Queen Elspeth, my mate, my equal, and your queen." More cheers, more howls, and as Elspeth looked out over the sea of faces, some genuinely happy, some calculating, some still uncertain, she saw opportunity. Not for personal gain, but to make real the changes Demon had promised. To ensure that other Omegas, other overlooked wolves, would have chances she'd never dreamed of before. The feast that followed was indeed epic, lasting well past midnight. Wolves from every level of pack hierarchy mingled, united in celebration, and Elspeth saw walls beginning to break down between social classes that had been rigid for generations. Late in the celebration, as she and Demon stole a moment of relative privacy on a balcony overlooking the courtyard. She voiced that observation. "You're changing things," she said quietly. "This ceremony, inviting everyone regardless of rank, publicly celebrating an Omega Queen, it's making wolves reconsider old prejudices. That's the idea." His arm slid around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Real change doesn't happen through laws alone. It happens through cultural shifts, through powerful wolves modeling different behavior. If the Alpha King visibly values and respects his Omega mate, others will follow that example. It won't happen overnight, but we're planting seeds. "We," she repeated, liking the sound of that. "Partners in changing the kingdom." "Partners in everything," he corrected, nuzzling against the mating mark on her neck in a way that made her shiver. "Though right now, I'm very interested in partnering with you in our private chambers. This ceremonial dress is beautiful, but I'm much more interested in what's underneath it." She laughed, then gasped as his teeth grazed her mark. "We can't just leave our own mating feast. Watch me." But he was teasing, and they stayed another hour, making sure to speak with as many pack members as possible, cementing relationships and building the bridges that would support their reign. Finally, as the moon reached its zenith, Demon swept Elspeth into his arms and carried her from the courtyard to raucous cheers and good-natured catcalls from the assembled wolves. She buried her burning face against his chest as he strode through the keep toward their chambers, but she was laughing, genuinely happy in a way she'd never been before. This was her life now, her mate, her home, her purpose. As Demon kicked the chamber door shut behind them and set her down carefully before beginning to unlace her ceremonial dress with eager hands, Elspeth sent a silent thank you to whatever fate had led her to that throne room 3 days ago. She'd broken an impossible curse and gained everything she'd never dared dream of: love, belonging, purpose, and a mate who saw her clearly and that chose her anyway. "I love you," she whispered as the dress pooled at her feet, and Demon's heated gaze raked over her with unmistakable hunger. "I love you," he growled back, sweeping her up and carrying her to their bed. "My fierce, brave, perfect little mate. Mine." "Yours," she agreed, pulling him down to her. "Always yours." And as they claimed each other again under the light of the full moon, their mate bond blazed like fire between them, a connection forged through courage, tested by adversity, and strengthened by unconditional love. The kingdom would face challenges ahead. There would be wolves who resented the changes, who clung to old prejudices, who saw Elspeth's position as a threat to the established order. But none of that mattered in this moment, in this room, with this male who'd chosen her above all others. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Alpha King and Omega Queen, mates in truth and partners in purpose, bound by a love that had already proven strong enough to break impossible curses. And somewhere in the castle, in the shadows where servants whispered their stories, young Omega pups heard about the servant girl who became queen and dared to dream that maybe, just maybe, they could rise above their designations too. That was the real magic Elspeth had worked. Not breaking cursed chains, but breaking the chains of prejudice and limited thinking that had bound wolves as surely as any dark